As a dietitian and a nutrition scientist, I'm always asked about what's the best diet for my gut and gut health. And actually it's a very important balancing story between quality carbs and quality protein. And hopefully this presentation will give you some insights into that. Okay, so when we talk about gut health, what are our concerns? And the general public, really simple concerns such as just laxation and normal bowel habit, prevention of constipation is actually one of the most common problems we have in our community. We're also concerned about more serious diseases such as inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. We're also concerned about things like irritable bowel syndrome, which is one of the most common gut problems of our community. And of course, we're also talking about colorectal cancer, which is really a major cancer in both men and women. So when we talk about gut health, we're talking about prevention of these sorts of disorders. So I'm going to talk about today quality carbohydrates and what are good for gut health. I'm going to talk about the role of good quality carbohydrates. I'm going to talk about what the role of good quality protein is as well, and why the balance between these two is so important. So firstly, let's talk about quality carbohydrates. When we talk about the carbohydrate family, the family is large and complex, and it's basically three major types. There's the sugars, the starches, and dietary fibres. And each one is important, of course, but they vary in quality and nutritional value. And probably the greatest nutritional value are in the starches and the dietary fibre, and I think probably the area of dietary fibre is the area that we need to focus most our attention now when we're talking about quality carbohydrates. We really need to be eating more of these foods, dietary fibres, when we're looking at gut health. And this is where I'm going to be concentrating my talk today. So what are good quality carbohydrates for gut health? Well, broadly, we can divide them into the dietary fibre, if you like, which is important for laxation, bulking and transit time, so hastening transit through the colon. We can talk about resistant starch, which is starch that is resistant to digestion in the small intestine. So this is basically reaches the bowel. And starch in the bowel is fermented to produce short-chain fatty acids, which have a range of health benefits, and it encourages the growth of beneficial bacteria, so it's a prebiotic. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid produced by resistant starch, and it's very important for colonic cells, for cells that line the colon, and may actually have anti-tumour, anti-inflammatory effects. So it's probably very important for gut health. Then the other types of dietary fibre that we find relevant to gut health are prebiotics, which include fructan and galacto-oligosaccharides. And these are prebiotic because they selectively stimulate the growth of certain bacteria, which we might have beneficial effects. And these also produce short-chain fatty acids. So these together, all of these fibres, resistant starch, dietary fibre, and prebiotic fibres are all vital for gut health. So where do we find these fibres in our diet? Well, we find them in a wide range of foods. They extend all the way through our quality carbohydrate containing foods, fruits, vegetables, grains and cereals. But you can see that the amount of these fibres varies depending on the food. Not all foods have high levels, for example, of resistant starch. So you need to eat a wide variety of these foods to get all of these different fibres in your diet. So what's the role of this quality carbohydrate? What are the roles of these dietary fibres that are relevant to gut function? Well, one of the important ones is simple roughage. That roughage is important for bulking, promoting laxation, and hastening transit through the colon. The other function of dietary fibres is the sponginess, the absorption of water, if you like. And that's also important and vital for bulking and promoting laxation through the gut. And the final one is really feeding our hungry microbiome. The prebiotic fibres are essential to feed our bacteria that inhabit our bowel, and we now know there's this huge community of bacteria that naturally live in our large bowel that really need to be fed, and carbohydrates, dietary fibres are the only way that we can feed them. Let's look at good bowel habit. What is good bowel habit is really around stool bulking and laxation and good transit time. So lack of constipation and not diarrhoea. It's something in between here. And I've used this illustration here as sort of I guess a river flowing and a fairly healthy habitat to live in if you're a microorganism. Basically, all of this is necessary for a good for gut health, good bowel habit. Simple bulking, laxation. And often you can tell a lot about your bowel habit by looking at your stool. And this is the Bristol stool chart, and it's been used for many years, and it's still used widely as a way of monitoring really how well you're going as far as your transit time goes. So for example, the categories go from 1 to 7, whereas type 1 is these small hard little lumps that might actually indicate constipation, so that your gut's not moving, you're not getting good transit through the gut, it's quite dry. And then you've got to the other end here, 7, you basically have diarrhoea, so you have liquid and tending towards diarrhoea. And really we need to be somewhere around 3 and 4. So you can look at your stool in the morning, tomorrow, and see where you are in this spectrum. But we are aiming to around about 3 or 4. And this is a very good indicator of your colonic transit time. And that's a good marker of gut health as well. So feeding your hungry microbiome with the prebiotic fibres, this is essential. This is essential really for gut health, is probably feeding these microbacteria with good fibres. And there's only certain fibres really stimulate bacteria. They're called prebiotic fibres. And while all prebiotics are fibres, not all fibres act as a prebiotic. So they are special fibres, and they're only found in certain foods. So that's why our attention really must need to look at where these are found in our diet. Okay, so what is the role of good quality protein? Well, quality protein, like red meat, and red meat's a very good example, is something that gives us a lot of extra nutrients. So protein, quality protein such as red meat is very nutrient dense. Red meat such as lamb and beef contain important sources of iron, zinc, protein, of course, omega-3 and vitamin B12. And the Australian Dietary Guidelines recommend around 65 grams per day, or about 130 grams every second day. When we compare what red meat has to something like legumes, which are good sources of fibre and prebiotic fibre, you can see that red meat contains some things and legumes contain some things, but they don't contain everything. No one food contains everything. So while red meat is excellent for protein, of course iron, zinc, it has no fibre and no prebiotic fibre. Whereas legumes, of course, very high in fibre, prebiotic fibre, and low in zinc. So the best thing is to combine these two together to really get that balance of nutrient. And why is balance so important? And one of the issues with high fibre diets is the presence of phytates. And these high fibre, high plant-based diets have very high level of phytates. And phytates are natural substances found in food that do bind, that can bind these cations, minerals, iron, calcium and zinc. And in binding them, they can limit their absorption and so the bioavailability of these things. So it's important that the phytate to zinc ratio is favourable. So, and it's recommended around about the ratio to be less than 15. So the phytate to zinc ratio is a marker of that you have reasonable good bioavailable zinc in your diet. And red meat is actually an excellent source of zinc and an excellent way to make sure that this ratio is favourable when you're having a high fibre plant-based diet. So balance is important there. The other issue about balance and prebiotic fibres is that even too much of a prebiotic fibre can be a problem. Too much of a good thing can even be a problem. And we have conducted a small pilot study using diets high in prebiotic fibre, and we were looking at transit time. And we were looking at this using a new technology called a smart pill. And the smart pill actually allows you to measure whole gut transit. You swallow the pill, and a little transmitter is, you can wear a little transmitter, and it basically tracks the time the pill takes to go from one end to the other, and it monitors pH, it monitors temperature through the whole gut. So it's a very, very smart new technology, and it's helping us understand a lot about what goes on inside the gut. In this little pilot study, we actually fed people high fibre diet, but different levels of prebiotic fibre. And the fibre, total fibre content was around 30 grams per day, but we varied the amount of prebiotic fibre to high prebiotic was about 12, moderate 8, and low is 3 grams of prebiotic fibre. And we were absolutely amazed to see this result, in that the very high prebiotic fibre, the transit time, it actually was delayed. So it was slowed down with the high prebiotic fibre compared to the other doses. In fact, people were really quite uncomfortable. They felt constipated, sluggish, and we actually had to stop that arm of the study. We couldn't continue because they were not comfortable. So it was a real lesson to us in that even too much of some fibres, certain fibres, might not be beneficial, and there's probably a real balance here as well, in that you need to have a combination of long chain complex fibres even with these prebiotic fibres. So balance is important even with those. So I'm just going to go over a little, introduce really a research study that we're conducting and nearly finished now, exploring the role of quality protein, quality carbohydrates, particularly focusing on the prebiotic fibre. And we ended up using the doses of prebiotic fibre, which we found were quite well tolerated, and that was 3 grams for low and up to 8 grams, 7-8 grams for moderate. And this study is registered, that's the full name there. So the study protocol is this. We had volunteers, these are all healthy people who are volunteering for these studies. They were randomised, they followed their habitual diet for 7 days, so we understood what their normal diet was, their 7-day normal diet. And then they were randomised to 3 weeks really of either a moderate or the low prebiotic diet. And they had a 7-day washout between, and they crossed over when they finished one. So it was a randomised crossover design. And they are single-blinded, and there's around 25 people we have recruited. And there's a 3-day stool collection really at the end of each of these periods, and that was frozen. We've collected samples for pH, short-chain fatty acids, and also for microbiota. And we also asked people to take one of these smart pills so we could measure transit time in real time through the gut and the various sections of the gut. Now the diet, we provided all of the diet for this study. So we completely fed all the food to our volunteers. And we do this so that we can control very carefully what people are eating. So the low prebiotic diet here, and the moderate prebiotic diet here. We make sure we are matching everything, energy, protein, fat, carbohydrate, sugars are matched, and starch. And the only thing that is even fibre, the only thing that varies is the level of prebiotic fibre. And we also made sure we had the phytate to zinc ratio less than 15, so that was very favourable. And it was around about 410 grams of red meat over the week. So This was following the Australian Dietary Guidelines for numbers of serves of fruits and vegetables and for the amount of meat included in the diet. So it was a very balanced diet. It represents really what we are trying to get people to eat on the Australian Dietary Guidelines. When we conduct our dietary studies, as I said, we provide all the food. There's a huge amount of effort goes into this. We have a research chef. The food is prepared. We have a little cooler van who transports the food out. We have a commercial kitchen. So an enormous amount of work goes into these sorts of studies, and they do take years to complete. So some of the results I'll just share with you now. This is the first result for transit time. And basically, again, using the little smart pill technology, we found in summary that the moderate prebiotic diet compared to the low, and that's around 8 grams of prebiotic fibre, increased or to hasten transit time, if you like, here. So it was significantly faster through the gut, which is desirable. So you got things moving along the gut and not sitting there. So that's a nice result. So that extra fibre, so the whole gut was faster and through the colon. So it was through the colon that the speed was faster and whole gut transit. So that's a very desirable effect of the prebiotic fibre. And the other thing that we're very interested in is the changes in fecal microbiota. Again, the low prebiotic fibre and moderate, and looking at the baseline as well. So you can see this sort of pie chart. Now this is sort of, microbiota is incredibly complex, so I'm just going to represent it as little colours here. And the different colours this is a genus level of different microbiota. But you can see really just how the colours are changing. The baseline diet here, which was sort of the average of our people, and how quickly it changes just by having really fibre. So these baseline diets, people only having around 20 odd grams of fibre a day. This low prebiotic fibre diet here still had 30 grams of fibre, because that's really what we recommend people to have. You see massive changes here in the microbiota. But if you add in the prebiotic fibre as well, you get huge changes, particularly this area here, which is Prevotella, which is an indicator of bacteria which like plant matter, like to metabolize plant matter. So again, you're seeing major differences with diet in the types and amounts of certain bacteria. So I guess the take-home message from this is that diet can have major impact on gut microbiota, and it happens within weeks. And it can be changed dramatically by the type of fibre you are feeding. So that's a take-home message from that. Short-chain fatty acids, this is just a little slide to show we compared the short-chain fatty acids compared to their baseline diet, and during this high fibre moderate diet you can see massive amounts and massive increase in short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids we know have all sorts of health benefits. So again, having extra fibre, having these special fibres can have major impact on what the microbacteria can produce, and that has probably very important for our gut and gut health. So to finish off and answer the question, what is the right balance of quality carbohydrate and quality protein for gut health? So our research did show that around 30 grams per day of dietary fibre, that also included around 7 grams of prebiotic fibres, did have a lot of benefits, which was very consistent with good gut function, a good gut microbiota, and consistent with good gut health. We also included red meat in this diet to make sure we had a lot of the micronutrients, quality protein, zinc and iron and so forth. So really the best diet for gut health is one that contains a good balance between these quality carbohydrates, dietary fibres, prebiotic fibres, and also quality protein, such as red meat.